Hi, this is Peter Russo for the Luxury Travel Podcast. I'm the co-host, and we have the host, Charles Greenberg. Welcome to the show again, the host of the Luxury Travel Podcast.
Hi, Peter. I'm Charlie Greenberg, and it's good to be with you.
We had a phenomenal podcast last time. If those didn't hear it, it's about the 10 questions you should be asking your travel agent about cruising. Boy, I learned a ton, so I'm really excited today to also learn. What's today's topic, Charles?
Today's topic is choosing. It's a big part of enjoying a cruise, making sure you're in the right cabin on your ship. So it's choosing the right cabin or stateroom or suite on your cruise ship. And I'm ready to get into it when you are.
Let's do it. Like I say, with any of the listeners that know, I've been on one cruise, and my room was the bed was split by something that went through the middle, and it was my honeymoon. Not optimal by any means.
That's funny.
But the last podcast we had was learning, which cruise lines to sort of pick, and ask the questions. And now, let's talk rooms, because that's the next most important thing.
Sure, we're going to narrow it down. We talked last time about all the things that make for a cruise that meets your expectations. Where do you want to go? How long do you want to be away? What's your personality? And making sure that it's consistent with the ship's personality. But certainly a big part of enjoying a cruise is getting into a cabin that's right for you. So let's say you're ready for your next cruise or your first cruise, if that's the case. And now it's time to choose accommodations. And to be honest with you, that can be pretty tricky. So on some ships today, travelers are faced with as many as 20 different categories of cabins on that ship. And they'll look at it and throw their hands up in the air and say, oh, this is too confusing for me. I need an interpreter. And a good travel agent is that kind of an interpreter. So where to begin? The first thing is you, either alone or with your travel agent, should look at the ship's deck plan. And the deck plan will show each deck. Some of the decks on the ship will have public rooms. Some will be all public rooms.
What do you mean by public rooms?
Rooms that are not cabins, that are open to the public. That would be restaurants, lounges, nightclubs, bars, casino, if there's a casino on the ship. Most ships do have casinos. Those are public rooms. Some decks have a mix of public rooms and staterooms for guests, and some decks will have 100% staterooms on them. So it's a good idea to become familiar. Let's look at the different categories. We talked about this for a few minutes in the last podcast. Let's talk about typically what's available on a ship. So now let's talk about the types of cabins that are available. The least expensive cabin is an inside cabin. Inside cabin means no window, although, to be honest, there's an exception to that, and this is kind of interesting. Disney and a couple of the new cruise lines have something they're calling a virtual window. They have a large screen, actually a TV screen, on one wall of this inside cabin that is hooked up to a live TV camera outside the ship. So you can't open the window and get the fresh air, but you'll see exactly where the ship is, even though you're inside.
How cool is that?
That's a rather ingenious idea. But anyhow, those are the least expensive. They're inside cabins. Let's go up one notch. These are outside cabins, and they'll have a view of the ocean. Usually it's a window or a porthole, and it's sealed. You won't be able to open it. One of the most popular, and probably more of these than any other kind of cabin on the ship, is one that has a balcony. And this is a sliding glass door that opens up and you can step out. There's usually a couple of chairs and a table out there. And on certain itineraries, it's the perfect way to see Alaska, or if you're sailing to certain other Very, very beautiful areas. It's magnificent to step out. You can also order your meals served on some ships, course by course, on the balcony, just as if you were in the dining room. So you can sit out there under the stars. The waiter will come into your cabin and serve you course by course, take away the dishes, of course, and
Wow.
that's a pretty cool way to go. There's something that some ships have called a French balcony, which is sort of interesting. They tend to be ships that are a little bit older, and the superstructure cannot handle a real balcony. They can't do it as an addition. So they just cut a hole in the wall of the ship and put in a sliding door with a rail. So you can still bring the outside in, but you can't step out actually onto the balcony. And then to notch it up to the next level, after the balcony cabin, there are suites and mini suites. And this is a larger cabin. Very often it has a separate bedroom and a separate sitting area. Most of the other cabins that we talked about, even the inside cabins, have, of course, they have a private bath, but it has a shower. The suites and the mini suites almost all have bathtubs. Some of them have jacuzzi. Some of them are two-story affairs.
Really?
One ship has a grand piano in its suite, so if you want to have friends over and play the piano, you can do all of that. Once again, inside cabins are the least expensive, suites are the most expensive. And Peter, do you have any idea which ones sell out first?
No.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but the two extremes. Cheapest cabins will sell out first and the most expensive, and the ones in the middle are left over. But when a cruise line announces that sailing is available, usually they work about 18 months out. Those most expensive cabins and the least expensive ones go first. Just as a side note, I always recommend making an early reservation. This is a whole other topic, but making the reservation early for a couple of reasons. One, you get the cabin of your choice. Even in the category that you choose, you're going to get the absolute best cabin. Let me just turn something off on my screen. Go away. Good. That would be one thing. Another is to get your choice of dining. Ships offer 3 different dining options: an early seating, a late seating, and most cruise lines have an anytime dining. Once the number of people have filled up a given category, you have to take what's left. And so I always encourage people to book early so they can get their first choice. And third, there's a thinking that, well, if I wait longer, maybe the prices will come down. And what I do as a travel agent who advocates on behalf of his clients is that I'll book it, and then every 6 weeks or so I check the prices. And if the price goes down, I'll call the cruise line, and they'll either issue a refund, or at the very least, they'll give my client a credit, an onboard credit for the difference that the price has gone down. So there are really no savings, and there are some definite advantages to booking early. So we're talking about the different types of cabins again. Generally, you're going to pay less if you're on one of the lower decks of the ship. The higher the cabin is, the more it is. And to be honest with you, this is a carryover from the old days before there was air conditioning, where the cabins up above were airier and the cabins down below were stuffy. Ships are 100% air conditioned. Every room has its own thermostat, so there's really no advantage to that. I personally prefer to be in a cabin that's mid-level. I don't want to be at the highest deck, and I don't want to be at the lowest deck. I want to be somewhere in the middle because I like having access to all the facilities on the ship that way. There are some ships where the upper decks will be larger and have more amenities than others. And again, travel agent will tell you about that. Ships and balconies are measured in square footage. So we would watch that and make sure that you get a decent sized room to go to. So there are some other factors beyond the ship's size. Balconies, of course, make the cabin feel much larger. Cabin size, I told you, is measured in square feet. A small cabin is about 120 square feet, and something that's 250 or larger, that's a very ample size to get around. I also would like to know the people that you're traveling with. If you're traveling with your spouse or your significant other, we want to get a cabin that has two lower beds. And on most ships, the beds, Peter, you were mentioning this before, the beds could be pushed together and locked together to form something that's approximately queen size. When you make your reservation, your agent will make sure that the bed configuration is the way you want it when you get to the cabin. If you're traveling with children, your kids will, your travel agent will help you decide whether you want to put the kids in your cabin with you, give them their own cabin, or consider a family cabin that can sleep up to 8 people in some cases. Disney's family-friendly cabins are especially good because the Disney ships have a bath and a half, an extra half a bath, and that makes it a little more comfortable. And something we talked about on the last podcast is people who are traveling solo, and ways to get around paying the dreaded single occupancy price per person double occupancy rate for single people, and there are ways to get around that. Another factor in choosing your cabin is its location. Just as important as choosing the right size cabin, let's make sure it's in the right spot. Cabins that are at the very back of the ship, facing the back of the ship, all the way aft, with balconies, tend to have the most spacious balconies and a gorgeous view of the wake of the ship. Doesn't show you where you're going, it shows you where you've been.
I think those are reserved for accountants.
Ha!
They're very good about where you've been.
That's a great idea. It's the CPA cabin.
That's right. The entrepreneurs are up front. We're always looking ahead, you know.
That's right. And middle management is, of course, the middle of the ship.
Middle of the road.
Yeah. That's very good. A little accounting humor there.
Yes.
If you're facing forward, by the way, where the entrepreneurs are, you get the same view as the captain, which seems terribly appropriate because entrepreneurs are the captains of industry.
Now, you had mentioned one time, let me just interrupt you briefly. You had mentioned one time to me when we were discussing these podcast series, when you pick your room, you got to know what's above it and below it, right? Isn't there cases where there's a lot of activity, racket, extraneous noise possibly that goes on?
I was actually just coming to that. I was gonna, let's hold that question for a second and I'll come to that. But you are 100% right on. Sorry about that phone in the background.
That's all right. Everybody's wanting to call you to book a travel.
That's right. They've seen the first podcast.
That's right. They're hot to go.
Excuse me. There's a double line outside my door.
Oh, well. You know, is there a fast lane? Do you have a fast lane in there? Do you have a high occupancy fast lane?
Easy, quick pass.
There you
go. The most stable cabins for people who are concerned about motion. I personally have not had a problem with motion sickness. I like getting into bed at night, and if there's a little bit of a gentle rocking and rolling motion, I'm just perfectly comfortable with that. I like that feeling. People have a concern about motion sickness. Getting a cabin that's in the middle of the ship will give them the most stable ride. Right. So not all the way forward and not all the way, not on the bow, not at the aft end of the ship, but all the way there. And then to your point, when I select a cabin for a client, I look not only to see what's to their left and to their right, but what's above them and below them. Because we don't want to be under or above a dance floor, a public room, or there might be something on the deck plan that's not labeled, just a blank space. And you have to know what's there because it's probably something like the kitchen. And if they start preparing breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't think you want to hear the chop, chop, chop in the morning. So nightclub, dance floor, basketball court, fitness, you don't want to be underneath the running track. You don't want to be under the children's playroom. And that's part of one of the things we opened this conversation with, looking at the deck plan and making sure that you're covering everything that needs to be covered. On the positive side, I like to have a cabin that's midship for a couple of reasons. At the end of the evening, and if the nightclub is all the way forward, the way it is on most ships, I don't like to walk the full length of the ship. Small petty thing. I don't like to walk the full length of the ship to get to my room. So I'd like to have a cabin that's in the middle of the ship and centrally located. I also like to have a cabin that's relatively close to the stairways or the elevator. I don't want, I think that's an extra convenience factor.
Yeah.
And if you take an outside cabin or even a balcony cabin, you have to be careful about an obstructed view. And that's something else an agent can help you with. You don't want to have a wall that cuts off the view to the right, or a lifeboat that is hanging off the side of the vessel that cuts off the view to the left.
Yeah, you pay for that view. You sure don't want to look at a lifeboat that doesn't move, you know.
Exactly. So, and somebody will say, "Well, here, stand on the chair. You can see the ocean." No, that's not what you want. There's another interesting option for choosing the right cabin for somebody who's on a budget, and it's called the guaranteed cabin. Not every cruise line offers it. Many of them do. A guaranteed cabin is, you say you'd like to have an outside cabin. They'll give you an outside cabin at the absolute lowest price, and they'll guarantee that you get an outside cabin or better. You might wind up in a balcony cabin. You might even wind up in a mini suite. It's been known to happen. I pay a low price, but the thing is, they won't tell you where it is. They'll assign it to you. They want to keep that option open of where they put you, and they can assign it to you on the day of the cruise. You won't know when you're in. But it's a way to save money, and sure, there's a chance you take a look at the worst outside cabin and say, if they put me there, I'll be okay with that because I'm saving a couple $100. Versus, no, I really want to know where I'm going to be. I don't want to take any chances. So
Right.
a guaranteed cabin is another way to remember. If your chosen cabin category sells out, they'll automatically upgrade you to a higher level. Let's see. One thing in choosing a cabin that will vary from one person to another is just how much time do you think you're going to spend in the cabin? For a lot of people, it's, I'm going to sleep there, I'm going to shower and change my clothes there, but I want to get out and enjoy the ports that we're going to visit. I want to enjoy the ship. So I'm really paying for something I'm not going to use. There's an expression in the cruise industry that when you're sleeping, all the cabins are the same size.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you have to think about, if you're going to spend a significant amount of time in your cabin, book the largest cabin you can afford. If you're only going to get up in the morning and get out and not get back very much to your cabin, then it doesn't really matter. And you can save some money and buy a less expensive model.
Now, for example, if I can interrupt you for a second, part of my whole thing is just to get away from people. So, I mean, if I wanted to have a cabin with a balcony that I could sit out there and read and have my meals if I wanted to, and they might have a mini bar, I don't know, but, that's the kind of thing you got to think about. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to get away from people, especially on the large ships, even the very large ships, they have so many public rooms where you can hang out and not feel that you're part of a crowd. They're masters at moving people around without making the largest ship that's out there now. Hang on to your chair for this one. You want to take a guess how many passengers it can hold?
5,000.
You're right on.
I saw that on the news.
Right.
I cheated.
5,400 actually, and crew is about 2,000.
That's crazy.
You got over 7,000 souls on that ship, and in spite of that, there are plenty of nooks and crannies where you can hang out and not feel like you're in a crowd. They have things on those ships like bumper cars and carousels and surf riding, and one of the new ships has a simulated parachute jump on board the ship. A wind tunnel,
right,
a vertical.
Wind tunnel, right.
But if you're really the kind of person who wants to get away from the masses, then a balcony cabin would be perfect.
Any of them have a shooting range?
They used to do skeet shooting. They don't seem to do that anymore.
Darn.
That was a big thing. They used to do skeet shooting.
Yeah,
no more.
I did that on one of the cruises. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My 3-day cruise, I got a chance to shoot skeet off the back, and that's just one of those check off things, you know?
That's nice. It's an experience. Water sports are big, you know, scuba,
Right.
uh, snorkeling, that kind of activity. Um, but to your point, if you want some privacy and you want to sit out on the veranda and be by yourself and just contemplate the ocean and the scenery around you, this is especially nice on the river cruises, as because the river cruises you're right off the shore and you're seeing the
See the
little
stuff go by, yes.
little villages go by, almost like watching a movie. Now, if you choose to book a suite, you want to make sure that the suite is giving you a separate bedroom and a separate living area or a sitting area. The fanciest suites, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, can be duplex affairs. Some of them actually the size of an apartment. There's something that some cruise lines have called spa cabins and spa suites, where the cabins and suites are on the same deck as the spa, and they have a private lounge and private access to the spa, and also a restaurant that the rest of the ship cannot use. I've said that once you pay your passage on the ship, for the most part, you have the full run of the ship. So even if you're in the least expensive cabin, an inside cabin, all the way at the end, once you're on board, entertainment, meals. This is one of the exceptions. If you're in a spa cabin, you can go to the spa restaurant, which features healthy, heart-conscious food, and the rest of the ship cannot go to that restaurant. That's one of the exceptions. But that's for somebody who's interested in that. That might be something they should take a good look at. Healthy dining options. In terms of amenities in the cabin, all cabins come with a bathroom with a private shower, of course. Bathtubs are a rarity, but if you need a bathtub, then you have to make sure that your agent books a cabin that does have one. Certain things may be more important to you as a traveler. You want to make sure you have a TV, and you want to know if it has a DVD player, if that's important to you. Most ships get CNN and a variety of local channels depending on what port you're in. Most cabins will have a safe. Many will have a mini refrigerator, of course an alarm clock, a hair dryer, bathrobes. And the one other thing I wanted to mention about balconies, about cabins in general, and balconies, is that smoking is pretty much prohibited on cruise ships today. There might be a room where people go to smoke, but just like a lot of hotels, if you smoke in the room and they find out that you're smoking, there's a substantial fine because they change all of the software,
Yeah.
the draperies, the bedspread, all of that goes out. So if you're a smoker, that creates a special need. And there are certain ships that still have smoking rooms, but they're becoming more and more rare. Now, as a travel agent, I'll be happy to help somebody pick the best cabin that they can for an upcoming cruise and look forward to working with them.
Very good. Any ideas on what's coming up on our podcasts in the future?
Well, I've got a couple of things in the hopper. I want to talk about some itineraries that are especially popular right now, especially here on the West Coast where we live. Princess, I mentioned in the last podcast that ships are coming down from Alaska. So they're going to put some ships that weren't previously here for this winter on the West Coast. And sort of a rarity for Princess, they're going to be offering 3 and 4 night cruises from Los Angeles. And that's a great way to get away for a short time, very, very cost efficient. And I hope to be on one myself this winter.
Very cool.
We'll talk about that. I also want to talk about some of the new features on ships too.
Cool.
Things like a bumper car ride.
And this is unrehearsed, so forgive me, but Mike, you have a podcast on the food available on some of these various types of ships, and another podcast, I mean, and maybe even the gambit of entertainment that you can have. And then finally, I'd like to see a podcast, if you can think about it, about the types of tours that you might be interested in. I mean, getting a bit more into the specifics. If you were a scientist like myself, I might want to go someplace to see some, I don't know, archaeology stuff. And I know that there was a tour. Matter of fact, there was a themed group of all kinds of This Week in Tech guys. The techs all got together and took up half a ship or something, and they often went off and running. But those might be interesting too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, some of the cruise lines have teamed up with celebrity chef Jacques Pepin, and they take a lot of pride in their culinary offerings, and we can certainly talk about that. We can talk to a certain extent about the shore excursions. A lot of it depends on the port that you're visiting. So the things you'll see in Juneau are very different from what you would see in Mykonos,
right,
on the Greek islands. But we can talk about that. We certainly can talk about the different types of tours, whether you do it on a bus with a cruise line or a private tour or a private tour with a smaller group.
Right.
We'll have
I mean, I know that I'm very interested in cooking. How cool would it be to be able to have a cooking class or two with the chefs on board, or even in one of the ports of call? That would be really cool.
Every ship offers a galley tour, and many of them have cooking classes and wine tastings and things like that.
Very cool.
So we can certainly go into that.
Okay.
It's if you're on a ship and you can't forget your problems, you might just be hopeless. It's a great way to get away.
Well, it'll be fun to have a podcast, I think, on the various entertainment values, things that you can do everywhere from rock climbing to the cooking and maybe wine pairing, food pairing classes, to exercise, to whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you're a great co-host, Peter. I really appreciate all of your help and support, so thank you so very much.
Well, great. So how do people find you again?
Oh, thank you. I'm Charlie Greenberg. My company is Your Travel Agency, and I'm at 760-772-5888. 760-772-5888. And send me an email if you have any questions. Even if you're not interested in the cruise, but you have a question after seeing this, I'd love to hear from you and answer your question. I promise I will. And that's Greenberg Charlie, Greenberg, Charlie, Charlie, at gmail.com. And I mean that. I love talking about travel and talking about cruises. So if you want to share an experience that you had or just have a question, I would love to hear from you.
Great. Well, I'll put that up on the screen here at the end. So thank you, Charlie, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thank you.
Bon voyage, I guess, right?
Bon voyage. Au revoir.
Au revoir.